What's going on, YouTube? This is Boxingwave, and we are back with another fight breakdown. This Friday, March 8th, on the undercard of Anthony Joshua against Francis Ngannou, we're going to see Joseph Parker face off against Zhilei Zhang. All right, and this is going to be for the WBO interim title. Now, we know that Alexander Usyk is currently holding the WBO, the IBF, and the WBA titles in the heavyweight division. And hopefully we get to see him fight Tyson Fury in a couple of months down the line. All right, but this fight here is probably the best fight on the card, and I would say this because even though Joshua and Ngannou is a good fight, especially because Ngannou performed well against Tyson Fury, I do think that this is Joshua's most dangerous fight since the Alexander Usyk fight. All right, so I think it's up there. I think this is a more dangerous fight for Joshua than Jermaine Franklin and Otto Wallin, and Robert Helenius. But this fight here is a better fight because these guys are coming off two phenomenal wins. All right, Joseph Parker beating Deontay Wilder, and Zhilei Zhang stopping Joe Joyce 2 times back to back. All right, so I think this matchup here is perfect. Joseph Parker coming off of that win. His career has been a lot of ups and downs, but I would have to admit that Joseph Parker, and he's only 32 years old. We got to remember that his pro career started very early. He was like 20 years old. I've been covering his pro fights for pretty much his whole pro career on the channel, and didn't have a very long amateur career. He did fight some of the top amateurs at that time, but he didn't stay amateur for that long. Whereas Zhilei Zhang stayed as an amateur for a very long time, picked up an Olympic silver medalist, and was a phenomenal amateur and fought a lot of amateurs, but he came in the pro rankings a lot later in his life. All right, he's currently 40 years old. All right, so Joseph Parker right now, though, I would have to say he's been in there with, he has one of the best resumes in all of professional boxing, I would have to say. Being in there, one of the few fighters that's been in there with both Wilder and Anthony Joshua, picking up a win against one of them, picking up a win against an undefeated Andy Ruiz, fighting Takam, fighting Chisora a couple times. He's been in there with Joe Joyce, and even with the losses, Dillian White. Like, there's not many fighters fighting professionally that can say that they've been in the ring with all of those fighters, or at least fighters on that caliber. It's not many. It's only a very, very few in the heavyweight division. All right, so Joseph Parker gets a lot of credit, even with the losses, even with the questionable wins. There's a couple of them in there, but he's been in there, and he's given us some really good fights over the years. Dillian White was one of the best fights, in my opinion, especially the way he rallied late at the end. I always say about Joseph Parker, and I thought he was always just too nice of a guy. I think when he was a prospect, obviously he was stopping a lot of guys on his way up. But I think when he started fighting the elite fighters, the better heavyweights like a Carlos Takam, things became a lot more difficult. It was harder for him to secure actual stoppages. I just thought he was too nice. Look at the Derek Chisora rematch where he was able to drop Chisora 2 or 3 times, but just couldn't put him away. He just hurt him, and he'll just kind of let Chisora recover. So with that being said, Joseph Parker, good fighter, well-rounded. I think at one point he probably had, and still today, probably had one of the fastest hands in all of boxing. I think he had a good career, man, and he can keep going. He can keep going. I mean, he hasn't even began fighting like any of the up and coming guys, the prospects. He's been fighting the seasoned fighters all of these years. One thing I will say going into this fight is that Joseph Parker, oh man, I had to really look it up, man. I had to find a fight that I did see live, or did see at the time, that had Jason Bergman All right. The guy is 25-11 right now with 2 draws. But I remember watching this fight. Jason Bergman back in 2016 January, so this is over 8 years ago now, was the last fighter that Joseph Parker faced that was a southpaw. And I remember watching the fight, but I watched some of it the other day, kind of skimmed through it, and I found it surprising how Jason Bergman was able to land some big left hands because Joseph was you know, just charging in at times, throwing combinations recklessly and not really being concerned of what was being thrown back at him. And if Jason Bergman had more power, he might have done some damage because he did land some big shots there. Maybe this happened because Parker didn't really respect his power or anything like that. But this is 8 years. This is 8 years without going to fight a southpaw, to going to fight one of the better southpaws out here. I mean, I was just watching a little bit of Zhang's film study, rewatched some of the fights that I've seen before. And, this guy Zhang is like a Luis Ortiz, but just a better, bigger version of him, in my opinion. And I'm a big fan of Luis King Kong Ortiz, but I think Zhang has a lot more to offer than Luis Ortiz. Plus, he's bigger than Luis Ortiz. You know what I mean? So, this is one of the top southpaws in the heavyweight division, and he's a very big man. And for his size, I know he's a slow. I know he has slow feet, but I mean, he has pretty quick hands for his size. And that was part of the reason why I had picked him to beat Joe Joyce. All right, and actually won a lot of money picking him to stop Joyce. But going back to Parker fighting the southpaw, it's been a long time, and I have to add, and I would have to say the same with Zhilei Zhang in his last opponent. But Joseph Parker fighting Deontay Wilder. Listen to me and hear me out. I'm not trying to take anything away from the win. All right, I'm not. I'm definitely not. But what I saw in that fight, I saw these flaws with Wilder for a long time. I've been saying this for a long time, as long as I've had this channel. I always thought that Wilder was a fighter that if he couldn't knock out his opponent, he would lose to some of these fighters on points. I also said that I never thought that Wilder was good at making adjustments. I think that Wilder has a game plan going into the fight. I think he prepares with Malik Scott or whoever his previous trainers were before him. He would prepare for an opponent, and whatever, regardless of what's happening in the ring, when he fought Luis Ortiz and he's losing every round, when he's fighting Gerald Washington, there's a few fighters there where the game plan is, even if I'm losing, even if I'm struggling, even if I'm having some issues, I'm going to land the right hand at some point. Whether it's the short right hand where a guy's lunging in like Robert Helenius, or if it's just, me just catching you with the right hand from deep. You know what I mean? Like, I think that Wilder has made it this far in his career. And listen, he had a great career. He made a lot of money and from being a limited fighter. He's been a limited fighter his whole career. A fight of Joseph Parker. And Parker, everybody is saying that Parker is a new fighter, and all this stuff. And listen, I'm a big Parker fan, but I don't want to sound delusional neither. Like, there's things that I see Parker do in this fight that I've seen him do in other fights as well. He just didn't fight an opponent that can really capitalize it. Yes, Wilder did step back at times, time the short right hand as Parker was lunging in at times. He did catch him a few times, but it wasn't enough to do any damage to Parker. Parker's always been pretty durable. I know Joe Joyce stopped him, but Joe Joyce stopped him with pressure and volume. Wilder, something about him in the way he fought the Helenius fight and the Parker fight, just that way he was fighting, it just didn't work out for him against Parker. Him and Malik, I guess, wanted to use the ring and try to catch Parker coming at me. That's clearly what they wanted to do, and that was clearly the game plan. It's just that Parker has always been quick on his feet, always had very fast hands, and I think Wilder just could not time him. Wilder was trying to catch him coming in, and he would at times, but Parker was just too quick. And I say all that to say this. I know a lot of us didn't look at it that way going into the fight. I know some of you guys did call it, but stylistically, it was all wrong. And I don't know if Parker beats every version of Deontay Wilder, because no, I do not think Wilder is the same fighter. I don't. I think just him being evasive and moving laterally the way he did the last two fights just goes to show that maybe he lacks a little confidence in himself. Maybe he doesn't really want to engage anymore. He's getting older. He's getting up there in his early 30s. He got brutally stopped by Tyson Fury twice. So, again, maybe he's not the same fighter, and maybe he lacks that killer instinct, and maybe he does have issues with his confidence, and maybe he's just getting older. But I think Parker not only caught him at the right time, but I think Parker matched up so well against him. And I have to give him credit because of the game plan that he was able to put on in that fight against Deontay Wilder. But I want to sit here and act as if the opponent was part of the reason why Parker looked so well. Parker looked great because of who he was facing and how they were fighting. And Wilder, with that lateral movement game plan, did not adjust at any point. He was clearly losing every round, and he continued fighting the same way towards the very end. And I know a lot of us talk about Anthony Joshua and his mental health and his confidence and all of this stuff, but clearly Wilder is having those issues right now, especially with that performance. All right? Because he's been stopped now, just like Joshua was stopped against Ruiz. All right, but Joseph Parker, I'm trying to just put it all together when it comes to Joseph Parker going into this fight. And he's coming off a phenomenal win. But I still think if he were to fight some of the fighters that he's lost to or some of the other fighters he hasn't faced, he would lose to some of these guys still. Which is fine, because I'm fine with fighters losing. But Deontay Wilder had nothing for him, at least not the way that he was fighting, not at that time. All right, let's talk about Zhilei Zhang. Again, I already talked about his catalog. Not as many big fights with in the pro rankings like a Joseph Parker, but the three fighters that he's faced that stood out is Jerry Forrest, Philip Hrgovic, and Joe Joyce 2 times. All right, those are the fights that stood out. And I'm not going to lie to you, I wasn't sold on Zhilei Zhang in the very beginning. I was watching him when he was, I don't know if it was on the Golden Boy cards, maybe. But, I was checking him out, and it was the Jerry Forrest fight that I saw. And Jerry Forrest is a good fighter. I'm not trying to take anything away from him. He's good. But that performance was poor. And, I had to go back to it and rewatch it, which I did. And what I realized is that even though Zhang started clearly strong, and I know he says, he had some health issues, he was dehydrated in that fight. He says a lot of things, but when I'm watching the fight, what I realized too is that not only did Jerry Forrest continue fighting and kept getting up because he's tough, he has a lot of heart, but Jerry Forrest relentlessly attacked the body. Unlike anyone I've seen do. Relentlessly attack. That's literally all he did. So, even though Joe Joyce says, Joe Joyce. I keep saying Joe Joyce. Even though Zhilei Zhang said, I was dehydrated, I was, I had health problems and all that. I'm not saying he's bluffing. or making excuses. But I also have to give Jerry Forrest credit for fighting on and attacking the body for a big guy like that. I mean, it's huge size, power advantage for Zhilei Zhang. Yet Jerry Forrest, for whatever reason, was able to outwork him in the second half. And that could partly due to his age, lack of activity, not high volume, stuff like that. And then we got the Philip Hrgović fight, which I just rewatched again. Not the full fight. I watched the full fight maybe about 3-4 months ago, sometime late last year, right? I watched the full fight because there's about 10 highlight videos of the fight on YouTube. Don't watch those. Even if you think Zhilei Zhang got robbed that fight, watch the full fight. The highlight videos don't tell the full story because you don't know how much round. If you're just showing the highlights, the biggest punches, yes, Zhang had the better moments in that fight. He landed the bigger shots. All right. So listen, if you feel that Zhang won the fight, that's fine. What I will say is that a lot of those rounds could have been viewed as stolen rounds because there were rounds where 90% of the rounds, especially in the second half of that fight, that Zhang was not throwing any punches 90% of the round, but landed a big combo or landed a big shot at some point in the round, and people probably scored it for him simply off of that. Depending on how the judges score it, they might score it for activity, which goes to Philip Hrgović. You wouldn't know that if you watch the highlights because the highlights is just showing those big punches that Zhang is landed throughout the fight. Whereas Hrgović was actually more active in a later half of the fight, even before that. He was just more consistent. But I do think Zhang had the better moments because every time he landed something big, Philip just kind of turned away and it backed up. And, and you can just, I'm saying, like, he probably was more effective. But a lot of those rounds, Zhang didn't do anything until he landed one big shot. And then that was it. And the way I scored rounds, like, listen, if you're busy or if you're landing clean punches, maybe not hurting your opponent, but landing some effective shots. And Zhang is fighting out of a high guard. He's just trying to not get hit for the majority of the round. But you landed a good combo at some point. I'm going to give the guy that's been working on round, unless you knock them down. You know what I'm saying? So that's the way I look at it when that fight is. And I think that fight can really go either way. I really do. I think depending on what you like, it can really go either way. But that fight there is what made me respect Zhang. Like I said, okay, this guy's legit. Because Philip Hrgović is a good fighter, a guy that is a dangerous fighter. A lot of people don't really want to face him, and I see why. But that is what made me respect him. And then we got the Joe Joyce fight, and we knew, we saw what happened with that. And it's like the way I look at the Joe Joyce fight is the same way how I look at Deontay Wilder. Joe Joyce, it's worked for him because he's been so big and so strong and so durable that no one has really fully taken advantage of him and his lack of defense, his doesn't move his head dead center on the line all the time, doesn't have any reflexes at all to get out of the way of the shots. No one has really taken advantage of his weaknesses except Zhilei Zhang, who, again, you're fighting a guy that is your size, maybe a little bigger than you, that could punch just as hard as you, and he's a southpaw. He knows how to time you coming in. Zhilei Zhang, stylistically, was a nightmare for Joe Joyce. And some people still didn't believe. They were so shocked that they thought Joyce was going to win the rematch. And the same thing happened. In fact, it happened even better in the rematch. You know what I mean? Like, Zhang destroyed him even worse in the rematch. So I think, like, these guys are coming off 2 phenomenal wins. But at the same time, when you look at the way their opponent was fighting in that fight, there was nothing that opponent could do to win that fight based on how they were fighting. No adjustments being made. All the flaws that these fighters have, both Wilder and Joyce, exposed, completely exposed. But now we are here. And I know I just spoke for about 20 minutes for just about their careers and where we're at. Because I enjoyed it. I like both of these fighters. You know, I really became a fan of Zhang. Um, Parker, I've been a fan of the entire time I've had this channel just about. So now we're here and this fight is going down. And Zhilei Zhang is the favorite to win. He is the favorite. I think he should be. Regardless of how this fight goes, you know, I'm still, as a fan, I'm still rooting for Joseph Parker. But Zhilei Zhang should be the favorite, you know. I think when I look at the two, I think Parker, in order for him to win, be mobile, okay? Zhang does not have quick feet. Use the ring, all right? Use the ring, use that jab. Be more active. You are younger. Throw more punches, you know what I mean? Be cautious because you're fighting a very, very good counterpuncher, all right? Guy that's going to time you. Try not to lunge too recklessly against Joyce, unlike Wilder, against Zhang. I keep saying Joyce, and I apologize. I am talking about Zhilei Zhang this whole video. Zhang is a phenomenal counterpuncher, and he's very good. He has very good timing. People talk about his straight left hand. I think one of the main punch for him, especially probably in this fight here, is the right hook. You know, very quick right hook. You know, and he gets the time. His timing is superb. If Joseph is going to be lunging in, he has to be careful with the right hand, the right hook. You know, because Zhilei Zhang doesn't just land it, all right, and put people down. You've seen that in the Filip Hrgovic fight. But if he is to get you, if you're in range, he is going to throw combination, and he's going to land that left. He's going to follow it up with that left hand exactly where he thinks your head is going to be. You don't want to get hit with two flush punches by this man. This guy is a serious puncher. So I think with Parker, use his legs, all right, change directions a little bit, feint, you know, just throw off Zhang's timing, all right, but definitely use your legs, definitely work the body. I brought that point up with Jerry Forrest for a reason. You fighting Zhilei Zhang, you want to attack the body, slow the big man down, slow the old man down, and try to do your best work in the second half. This is the earlier rounds where he's fresh. I think a lot of people were depending on Joyce to pick up the pace in the second half of the fight. The problem is Joyce was too damaged by that point, so it really didn't matter. Whereas Parker here, Parker could move a little bit, you know, not the greatest defender, but he has a little slickness to him. He can slip shots a little better, move his head a little better, get underneath some of these shots. He can do things better. He's better at slipping, throwing that overhand right. So Parker can do things that a Zhang can do, even a Filip Hrgovic. He's just more smooth than those guys. You know, I think he's more like a Jerry Forrest, just better. You know what I mean? So quicker, better, just better athlete, better fighter overall, more durable. So I think Parker has the tools that we saw Jerry Forrest use in that fight. I think Parker needs to bring some of those tools and, you know, fight with him, but be cautious. Don't stay in the pocket for too long. Be in and out. Be quick. Speed, 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 and volume. All right. Outwork the big man. Zhilei Zhang. Zhilei Zhang is not a high volume puncher. He's more an accurate puncher. He's trying to make every punch count. So you can outwork him and beat him on points and activity, especially if you're moving. All right. I would say try to back him up, but that seems to be a little bit real unrealistic. You know what I mean? I don't expect that to happen. When it comes to Zhang, I think Zhang, again, walk Parker down, trap him. But Parker is coming in and throwing the overhand right and and try to do the combinations. Parker's a guy, he's going to throw the two first, and then he's going to follow it up with jabs. Sometimes he's going to double the jab, throw the right hand. One thing I forgot Parker, I should say, Parker should work on throwing straight shots more than throwing the overhand or wide right hands. I think he should work on throwing the right hand more down the middle, because Zhilei Zhang tends to rely more on his high guard than moving his head too. I think he slips a counter at times, but for the most part, Zhilei Zhang is not using. He's a big guy, not too much upper body movement. So that's one thing. One key thing with Parker, especially that's another thing, is Parker needs to move to his left. All right, circle to his left. I know that's where the hook is at, but I think that's better off than catching straight lefts down the pipe by you moving to your right. I think that's where Zhilei Zhang is going to want you to be. But Zhang, on the other hand, again, walk Parker down. All right, try to trap him in corners. Throw those combinations when you have him trapped in a corner. I think what Zhang wants to do is everything that Joe Joyce did. And I think he's capable of doing it, but better. With better defense, with better counters, with better speed. He can literally be Joe Joyce in this fight. He can mirror Joe Joyce, but do it better. And I think that is going to be the biggest problem for Parker. Because he's now fighting another guy that's really big, much bigger than him, that's going to be coming forward. And he's going to be not more high volume than Joe Joyce, but Zhang is going to be more accurate than Joyce. And that could lead to being more powerful, because I don't know if Zhang hits harder than Joyce, but he's more accurate. He's more likely to land. His timing and punch placement is so much better. He's just not just throwing. He's making every punch count. So I think with Zhang just needs to come forward, trap Joseph Parker, all right, land those hard, heavy shots, and bully him. One thing that Wilder did not do, that I've seen even like a Simon Keane, who was his last opponent before Deontay Wilder, Joe Joyce, who else? There's a number of fighters that I've seen Parker be just as aggressive, but they just pushed them off. Parker would come in and he'll start throwing combinations and he'll exchange, and some of these guys will just bump him. And I think that is something that we can see from Zhilei Zhang. Something that we saw with Joe Joyce. Some of these guys are not going to allow Wilder Parker do what he did to Wilder. Wilder didn't tie up. Wilder didn't push off. Wilder was just moving. Anytime he was trapped, he would just try to circle around again and then continue circling around. Like, these other fighters know how to throw off Joseph Parker, and especially counter him on the inside, because Parker, again, he can be a little reckless, and sometimes he does lunge in, sometimes he exchange where his chin is up. You know what I mean? I think Parker is hittable. So I think with Zhilei Zhang, again, land the left hand, land the right hook, back him down. You want to come forward against Parker relentlessly, continuously come forward to Parker, pressure him. Everything Joyce did, like I said, Zhilei Zhang should be able to do. And I think Zhilei Zhang is going to be too much for him. I just think that Parker coming off a big win, Zhang is completely different, and especially that lack of southpaw experience. I just think overall Zhang is going to be too much for him. All right. And I think that he's likely to stop Parker. I think he's going to go in there to try to make a statement. Parker's coming off a phenomenal win, and I think Zhang wants to go in there and do it. Not saying that Parker doesn't have a chance. He does have a chance, but I feel like Parker has to fight the perfect fight. Use those legs, attack the body, slow the old man down. But to do all of that, he's going to have to take some hits doing all that, especially in the earlier rounds where Zhang is fresh. I just don't know he's going to be able to do it. And even if he rallies late, because Zhang maybe slows down or something like that, he is going to take a more than enough damage leading up to that point. I just think that Parker has to really fight the the perfect fight, you know. And I don't think it's likely, excuse me, that Parker hurts Zhang. You know, Zhang is just too big. I mean, again, Joyce Hergovich couldn't do nothing against him, you know, but outthrow him. You know, and I don't think Parker is going to do enough. So I have Zhang winning this one. I think he's going to stop Parker, maybe like TKO style, not like knocking him out, but stop him. Refs might have to jump in and stop the fight. I am expecting Zhang to stop him. I know Parker is pretty durable, so I won't be surprised if it goes 12. But I think Zhang is just too much, man. He's a beast. All right, so that is my breakdown. I know it's a really long video, but I will be here doing live commentary, so make sure you be here. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. And that's it. I'll see you guys on the next one. Y'all have a good one. Peace.